Aphoristic Appendage to On Truthtelling. 1351 to 1400. 1351. On at least one level, the elites of the world and the majority come together, their proclivity to mediocre thinking in the moral sphere. 1352. Both the prison and the psychiatric hospital open ever wider their doors when the authorities find new ways to determine who and what are threats to society. 1353. For the sake of the millions of people already in this world and those who are yet to come, every TV set should have a sign on it reading, "Health Warning. The media is not your friend." 1354. If one were to draw up a list of all the cruel and crazy things that governments have done in the name of either protecting or improving society, which, of course, includes everything government, it would, to quote Shakespeare, a tale unfold whose lightest word would harrow up thy soul. 1355. A. Everybody wearing masks today looks miserable. All you can see is their big eyes that blink. B. But they're doing this, putting up with a bit of discomfort and inconvenience, because they're socially concerned, don't you agree? A. I agree they're socially concerned and putting up with something, but I'm not sure it's worth the price. B. What do you mean? A. The price of emptying the world of millions of smiles. 1356. COVID-19 aphorism. How can we account for this blind obedience to authority that not only takes in the broad masses but many of the most intelligent, rational members of society? How can we understand this strange mixture of collective insanity and collective lucidity that allows a society to function more or less efficiently while depriving its members of the power of critical thinking on at least one or two levels? How can we get to the nub of the matter without going straight to the profoundly social and psychological dimension, without putting aside the moral one which, although important in its own right, cannot be other than a hindrance to getting the basic view of this perplexing, discomforting, and even deranging phenomenon? Surely, then, there is a logic in this madness which must be looked at. Surely it must belong to a context in which, by and large, people aren't misled by the authorities and therefore have good reason to trust them. Surely, it must involve a kind of reasoning which goes as follows: unlike some opponent or critic of the government, the people in authority are those who must take responsibility for their words and deeds. If they mislead us, they risk bad consequences not only for us but for themselves. Therefore, it is not in their interest, especially in important matters, to fool us and, conversely, it is not in our interest not to believe them. Finally, it follows as night follows day that belief in the authorities, in conjunction with respecting the rules they set down, is the best way to go forward and bring about a favorable outcome. Is the above not sound reasoning? Does it not speak of a sensible way of operating in the world? Is there anything in it that could be construed as being the slightest bit foolish or demented? Of course not, and in most instances, it could even be viewed as a sort of collective wisdom. Whence comes then this notion of a collective departure from reason? Whence comes this seemingly outlandish claim that sensible beliefs and habits, sensible ways of reasoning all of a sudden take on a theater of the absurd look? Whence if not from history when, at various times, the rules of the game have suddenly changed with few people being aware of it? With the majority thinking the old rules pertaining to government intentions and reliability were still in place. For the fact of the matter is that governments can blunder and, if these blunders are big enough, lead to a sea change in how they view their own interests in relation to the interests of those they govern. Now, instead of following the general rule of truthfulness to be on the safe side of things, it is the lie that comes to the fore and promises, at least for the short term, political, professional, and personal salvation. But this lie must of course come in the form of a successful cover-up which denies any lying, any wrongdoing, any mistakes, and any fact or testimony which conflicts with the image of an actively benevolent, well-functioning government. It is this more or less successful cover-up, effectuated in many ways, which is the key to understanding this madhouse look of present-day society where people, while accepting ever more indignities in the name of protecting themselves and others, no longer ask questions. 1357. The left has the tendency of tilting over into lunacy, the right into cold-blooded indifference, and both into full-blown, paranoiac intolerance. However, these tendencies must be nurtured by either crisis or conquest before they can really become something. 1358. It is a core principle of many people that one shouldn't do things simply because there is pressure from the outside or because it is relatively safe and secure not to resist those who wish to force their will upon them. In times of bad government, it is essential that such people be counted and called to account those who betray their trust. Otherwise, authoritarian and dictatorial elements, with the machinery of the state at their disposal, will run right over them. 1359. There are conspiracy theories for the simple reason there have been and always will be plots, machinations, coups, etc. However, the idea that one or a few people could take over the world, a seemingly popular notion these days, flies in the face of all history where, for every string of victories a leader, a party, or a nation has had, there have also been at least one or two unpredictable elements leading to errors of judgment and displays of outright stupidity. 1360. The people are like a sea that can allow even the most vile leader or dictator to sail about majestically but also, with a sudden change of fortune, send him, his vessel, and all his affairs to the bottom. 1361. Who doubts that, after the Nazis took power in Germany in 1933, honesty and openness in political matters became a highly risky affair? And who doubts that this didn't affect virtually all members of society, including many of the most refined and knowledgeable? And, finally, who doubts that this lack of truthfulness on a grand scale wasn't quickly covered over by everyone committing themselves to protecting the nation and its interests? 1362. The science of the day is only as good as the scientists who practice it. If the second can be corrupted, so can the first. Likewise, the information of the day is only as good as those who provide it. If they become dishonest, what chance does it have of being reliable? 1363. Distractions are a common ploy of those who have weak or no arguments. 1364. People who insult and abuse others in the name of fighting injustice believe they occupy the moral high ground, which up to a point is true, but certainly not as a long-term benefit or beneficence, being that, as is commonly said, actions speak louder than words. 1365. In a long military struggle, it's hard to stay motivated without believing God is on one's side in some form or other. 1366. People who fudge on their principles only have short and long-term gains of a material sort in their sights, the subtler losses resulting from a slow erosion of character falling outside their radar. 1367. Nowadays political parties shape their policies more in accordance with polls than principles. If that isn't corruption, I don't know what is. Forget that. It's climate change that matters. Without the planet, what matters the rest? Without principles, what matters the rest? 1368. Short roadmap from the authoritarian to the unthinkable. The first official position is, if to make the world safer and more secure for all, our opponents must be called a few names, so be it. The second, if to make the world safer and more secure for all, our opponents must be treated a bit roughly, so be it. The third, if to make the world safer and more secure for all, our opponents must be viewed as harmful to society, so be it. The fourth, if to make the world safer and more secure for all, our opponents must lose some of their rights, so be it. The fifth, if to make the world safer and more secure for all, our opponents must be eliminated, so be it. 1369. It would seem that some sort of struggle is needed to fill up a life, even if it involves a downward course with dwindling returns. 1370. When a person can do little more than rattle off a series of accusations, when he does so repeatedly with little or no argument, when his language is full of the loathing of others and self-satisfaction from being able to judge and condemn them, if not before others, then at least in his own eyes, it is certain, if he truly believes what he's saying, that he has much in himself he would like to see somewhere else. 1371. Millions of TV viewers throughout the world today are being fooled into believing they're getting not only information and entertainment on their sets, but also a good education. 1372. If one wishes to know what is right or wrong with the world, it is better to listen to a few choice individuals than to institutions. While all gross errors and grotesquerie are likely to be avoided by the second, but there are monstrous exceptions, operating with utmost integrity isn't their top priority. 1373. Most people's expertise runs no further than their own little world. Politicians can take advantage of this by being the false teachers and prophets of the larger one. 1374. Decrepit old age can't go on for too long, and no doubt this consideration, along with others of a moral sort, keeps it a forbidden topic insofar as the question can be raised, why does it go on at all? 1375. TV watching is like eating junk food in that it's both pleasing and filling, not to mention addictive, but at some cost to one's health. 1376. COVID-19 aphorism, both the coronavirus and climate change camouflage corruption. We would do well to focus on the latter for, if unchecked, it's far more likely to lead to catastrophe. 1377. Everyone and no one is an expert on current events. 1378. With social media nowadays, there is the possibility of finding someone who talks honestly about a matter and who, moreover, is very knowledgeable about it. The same cannot be said for mainstream media with all its talking heads and so-called experts who, along with overstepping the limits of their knowledge, must buy into a prevailing narrative. 1379. For someone who wields moral authority but hasn't developed a sense of self-criticism, there is the danger of ending up, especially if a sense of humor is also missing, taking on the role of supreme judge of humanity. 1380. The greatest lies are those that, becoming official, permit no discussion or raising of questions. 1381. Thank God that the vast majority of words come into being without politics but only as the perfect fit of sound and sense, the inbuilt poetry of every language. 1382. If one wants to find the truth about a matter, particularly a complex one, all points of view should be open to discussion and debate. Ultimately, this is what happens, but the process is held up by those who already know it. 1383. The totalitarian impulse starts with the belief that one is in possession of the truth and has a mission to change the world. If unstable conditions result in the propagation of this belief, it becomes the nitroglycerin of human affairs. 1384. The present is given to telling lies to itself, the past and future to collaborating to correct it. 1385. The world-changing mission as it is presented nowadays, not only by politicians but also by many others, seems to be popular for the reason that, while promising the coming of a near-perfect or at least highly improved world, which of course is merely a variant of an age-old idea, it does so without asking much in return. At least, it seems to be proffered as something that doesn't require more than putting up with a few inconveniences and, as far as making any substantial sacrifices, nothing seems to be on the horizon. Whether this popular idea of a general mission for humanity continues to thrive is no doubt dependent on keeping things within the comfort zone of most people. In light of this, politicians definitely have their work cut out for them. 1386. COVID-19 aphorism. With respect to the current crisis, mainstream media has morphed into a machine of propaganda capable of the most incomplete, one-sided, fear-driven and fear-laden reporting that has ever been done in peacetime. Although not the only culprit to blame for the current mess, for the virus is but the finger of the whole arm, it will surely have to admit one day, if it has not done so already, that it has taken a wrong turn from which it will likely never recover. 1387. The greatest danger to society comes not from those who are powerful, desperate, or wrong but all three together. 1388. While the present provides a platform for lies and deception, the study of the past and the work of the future provide one for truth. 1389. Intellectual thought is not immune to being influenced and even corrupted. 1390. Politics is never so removed from prejudice that it should ever be allowed to pose as pure reason. 1391. A consumerist society with the greatest benefits of capitalism and the greatest control methods of communism is what the New World Order seems to be, with a major selling job going on to convince everybody it's the best of all possible worlds. 1392. A. I distrust a scholar who speaks as if every word he utters cannot be contested. B. But there are many thinkers and teachers, authors of great books, who fall into this category. A. No doubt they think they've earned the right to it. But here great knowledge and learning fall short by forgetting one can always make a fool of oneself. 1393. The total number of people alive today and all those yet to be born will always be a minority, indeed, a shrinking minority of all those who have already died and all those who will. According to scientists, some 107 billion people have already swollen their ranks. 1394. Never does evil have freer reign than when done in the name of good and, as a corollary to this, never greater power than when done by government. 1395. Political, popular, scientific, and medical madness have finally caught up with economic insanity as a general deterioration in society that is also generational in a both directional and consequential sense. 1396. COVID-19 aphorism. A collective hubris has smitten the politicians of today, right and left, north and south, east and west. They have come to believe they can control everything, even the future. But let them open a history book to discover that, no matter how successful they may be for a time, their fate is ultimately one of being ungraciously and even severely treated by those who write their stories. 1397. COVID-19 aphorism. To live today is to realize how many politicians, when threatened with a situation involving their most vital interests, are willing to betray public trust by playing on it. 1398. COVID-19 aphorism. The current pandemic has allowed all the would-be Caesars to come out of the closet but, at the same time, revealed their hidden motive for getting into politics. 1399. According to Alonso, the Duke of Vienna in Shakespeare's Measure for Measure, those who follow their own harsh rules have something to say in their defense while those who don't are tyrants. Today we have politicians and other leaders who, at private gatherings in many luxurious settings, don't abide their own strict rules. Unless they maintain their cohesion as a group and increase their power over others to an unheard of degree, their fate has already been marked down. 1400. With short-term smartness but long-term stupidity, politicians are best kept in check when they keep themselves in check. Failing this, they unite as fools, doing all a great disservice.